Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello, I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber, and your podcast host today. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at Governor Whitmer's 7th State of the State address. What was in it? What was it? And what does it all mean for the business community? Very pleased to have our special guest today, some Capital Insiders from the Michigan Chamber, Wendy Block, the Michigan Chamber's Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy, and Mike Alaimo, the Senior Director of Legislative and External Affairs. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Well, we've all sat through a few of these before, and I just kind of want to start at a high level. Your general impression, or if you had a headline as you listen to it. Wendy, we'll start with you. What's your overall reaction?
Well, have sat through quite a few of these at this point, and I would say general reaction is that the governor, kind of rightly so, given the political environment we're in, spent a lot of time talking about finding common ground and compromise. She outlined a few things that she's interested from a policy perspective in pursuing over the next year, but much of the speech was light on details and frankly, a little fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think she's finding herself in a politically uncomfortable situation right now, and recognizing that we saw some very direct attempts and overtures towards either Republicans specifically or, demographically speaking, talking a lot about issues involving, young men and getting them involved in career readiness or things of that nature. But to Wendy's point, there was not a lot of substance. We didn't hear a lot of details. It was a lot of messaging and frankly, victory laps.
Yeah, I viewed it a lot as a political realignment speech. And
for sure.
I give the governor credit. I think she does deliver a nice speech. I felt bad she had a cold that evening.
Yeah.
That makes it difficult. But the last 2 years of your second term, it's hard to generate momentum. It's hard to generate that oomph you kind of need, where you aren't maybe putting out a vision document. You're kind of putting out a governing document, how do we go forward. But you're right, there wasn't a lot of details, which I think can be frustrating to people because we have a lot of challenges in the state.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also feel like there was a recognition that that the governor didn't really want to set herself up for failure had they outlined a number of policy proposals that were catered more to the Democratic Senate and the progressive type contingency. They know that those policies are going nowhere in the House. And so why put them out there only for you to have a, bright red check mark or X mark next to those things at the end of the calendar year. So maybe it was a little bit smart on their part just to kind of be doing the victory lap and to be talking about some things at a very high level.
How much of this speech do you think portends what happens next for the governor? How much of this is putting out, Mike, you said it, a political speech, and we talked about realignment. How much of this is because where she wants to go? Yeah,
I mean, it felt like a lot of it. I mean, look, from what she focused on, there are things that I think the Michigan Chamber or other folks across the aisle are happy to work with her on. When you talk about permitting and you talk about licensure and making those things more efficient, that is certainly something our members would like to see. I don't think they care so much about maybe a refund or some of these things that she was kind of talking about as an initial step. But where and when there's bipartisan solutions on actually making government work better for you, work better for the business community, and lead to greater efficiencies and transparency, absolutely. But then we need to see the action behind that. So I think there's definitely a wait and see type of approach. And then of course there were a lot of these, maybe more softball messaging points around, vaping in schools or cell phone use and things like that, where, yeah, sure. I think that's something that, is going to have some level of popular opinion behind it. But, where are we going from here?
And I know the governor, she did mention some of the issues that are important to the business community. She talked about workforce, attainable housing, fixing the roads, permitting reform, and they were good topics. Wendy, how come you think she didn't go deeper? Why didn't we get details?
I think they're still waiting to see what they can sell in this legislative environment, right? So you have a Democratic Senate, a Republican House. They're not really sure how they can proceed on a lot of these big issues. It was interesting that the governor actually came out the week prior to the State of the State with her so-called road roads plan. I forget exactly what she called it. Maybe a road map for roads or something, and kind of put some ideas on paper, but again, not with a lot of specifics. And they seem to kind of be wanting to hodgepodge their way to, $3 billion or more for roads by one-off tax increases on things that they can sell. But I think the concern would be that there's a lot of things here for people to shoot at, and probably not a good path on a lot of those things, including a 50% increase in the corporate income tax. So again, I think from a state of the state perspective, not a lot of details, just a lot of feel-good stuff, because it's like, well, who doesn't agree with this, right? Like, who doesn't agree with permitting reform and eliminating pork barrel spending,
Right. Yep.
all of these things? It's like, yeah, I can get behind that until I see the details, potentially.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much of this is impacted even by what goes on at the federal level, like DOGE. To have a Democrat governor come out and talk about transparency, accountability, results. It seems to be the national theme that's trickling down, and people are saying, hey, we're willing to fund government, but it's got to be used efficiently, effectively. And before you start asking me for more money in Lansing, tell me how you're spending what we currently have.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I mean, we were talking about this earlier. I mean, going so far as to say she talked to Pete Hegseth about, a fighter mission at Selfridge. I mean, that's just the name alone is, I would argue, pretty toxic to most Democratic circles. But I think she recognizes that, this is the kind of current political zeitgeist that we're in. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy to deal with some of these issues, right? Road funding has been a long time historic debate. There are very strong philosophical opinions that differ on how to appropriately fund that. But, again, I think we are seeing a bit of a void here, and we're waiting to see what the actual plan can be. And as Wendy pointed out, CIT increase has been floated. It's a complete non-starter. It's not an appropriate way to fund the roads. We saw a bill introduced this week, and so people are trying to figure out, is this real? Is it not? I think we need to see more substance, and we need to see it pretty soon.
Well, how do you handicap on that, Mike? On roads right now, you're a lead for us on that. And like you said, there's plans out there. I give the governor credit. She put out something. She put out something to shoot at. I give Speaker Hall a lot of credit. I thought he put out a detailed plan. I thought he came forward with ideas. And that's what you need. You need to have something that you can negotiate from, or conversation starters.
Yeah.
But how do you view the roads discussion right now, and where do you think it goes?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen maybe something a little bit like this before. I think that there's a real chance to get something done. I think that's the bottom line. We're not maybe worlds apart. At least there's some agreement, for example, on using existing funding and reprioritizing funds in the budget. But again, how much and in what way, that's going to be open for debate. We'll see if the governor is serious about some of these kind of one-off tax increases, like on heavy trucks or on
delivery fees.
These types of things that, again, it's hard to imagine how that is going to be a significant drop in the bucket, right? It's hard to see how that's going to significantly contribute, and all the while you're really negatively impacting, one specific, economic function, right? I think the delivery fee is a really good example of that, where, you might just think it's, you're going after some big company, but in reality, you're going after the people buying these products, and a lot of them are relying on the affordability and access of these products to, meet their needs.
What do you think the number is that we need for roads?
So, I mean, analysis has been saying that we need $3.9 billion a year additionally. I think that the general discussion has been more around the $3 billion mark. I think from our the business community standpoint, we want to see a solution that's sustainable, right? And so whether it's $3 billion, whether it's $4 billion, we just want to see the problem fixed, and we want to see a long-term solution.
That's one of my concerns with some of the parts of the governor's plan. They seem to be unstable revenue streams.
Exactly.
Even if you're looking at a CIT increase that she has kind of floated as discussing on that, if you have an economic downturn, your tax receipts go down.
Right.
A lot of times, we all know basic economics that whatever you tax, you're probably going to get less of. If you start taxing digital advertising, if you start taxing delivery fees, you're going to get less of it. The revenue goes down, and then you really haven't enhanced your overall goal of having revenue for roads.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly. And all the while, it's not getting anywhere near where you need to go to hit that $3 or $4 billion figure.
Wendy, how politically charged is roads? As I said, we're in the last 2 years of the governor. We really only have about 8 months to get anything done here in Lansing because then the House and Senate are both up. All the state offices will be up again. We'll be full swing election year. What's our window politically, do you think, to get something through a divided legislature?
Yeah, it seems really hard to imagine a situation where the legislature gets much beyond October and feels like they still can do this, right? I think it kind of comes down to what solutions on their table. Are they going to find government efficiencies, aka cuts, primarily to rely on a road funding solution? Maybe they have a longer window on that. But if they want to increase some sort of taxes on everyday Michiganders or things that will be passed through to everyday Michiganders, it does feel like they're more in that next 8-month window. And then maybe you're kind of in neutral through the next election cycle. So, it remains to be seen. Again, I think the speaker has kind of hinted that he might come out with a different version of his plan next week, maybe one that starts with this idea of efficiencies first and put more details on paper about that. So it'll be interesting to see what's in that plan and what we think of it. Certainly, it kind of has that good first goal of efficiencies first. So, I think the road here is bumpy. It's filled with potholes to, getting something across the finish line and on the governor's desk for her signature.
Could being a divided legislature almost make it a better position for negotiations? Because both sides, I think sometimes it's much harder to govern. And we saw this with the Democrats previously. When you have all the levers of power, nothing's off the table and everybody wants everything. When you're divided, there has to be some give and take, and each side has a little bit of cover to negotiate.
Well, I think there is optimism that a bipartisan solution can be found on a lot of hard issues this session, just kind of starting with the success that the legislature found on earned sick time and minimum wage. It really seemed like that was an uphill battle in divided government, but yet a deal did come together, albeit at in the final hour of the final day, and it wasn't perfect. But I think there are a lot of legislators who are out there now saying, wow, we can do hard things and we can come together when something calls for it. Now, that was a crisis situation that they were responding to. Obviously, the roads are not in good condition at all. They're actually, many of them are in poor condition. And so can they step into that challenge without a deadline and without kind of the constituents demanding that they do so?
Yeah. Mike, we've seen Speaker Hall and the House Republicans, they recently unveiled some expanded oversight committees, subcommittee focus areas. Can you kind of let listeners have a little sense of what's going on there? Again, it seems to be around this theme of transparency and accountability. I know Speaker Hall has HEAT, his Hall Ethics and Transparency Accountability.
Love the acronym.
Yep, and he's diligent on it, and he's really pounding it. I think it's good, and I think it is resonating with people. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, you want government to be efficient.
Yep.
And I think that's always a good place for legislators to start.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I think the structure of the committee is interesting. It's kind of a dedicated standing committee with subcommittees. You usually don't see subcommittees within a standing policy committee. The folks that are on those committees, I don't believe are on other policy committees. Maybe some of them are, but for the most part, they're not on other issue area committees. And so there's going to be a clear focus on oversight. What's also interesting is that these committee chairs will have subpoena powers. And so you are going to likely see directors or division heads from these agencies being brought before the committee, going on public record, and being in the hot seat, right? I mean, I think the acronym is appropriate because I think that's partly the point, at least for from some of the Republican perspectives. I think for us, again, I think we want data-driven arguments to lead to good policy. We want transparency. We want accountability. And that's what I think these committees have the opportunity to bring to light is what it was done in the past, why were certain decisions made. Permitting could be one of them, right? Mm-hmm. Why are there these holdups? What's going on? We need to, kind of lift the hood and see what's underneath here and check and see why has it been so difficult for our business community to work with these agencies and interface with them? So there's opportunities to kind of look at those things. It probably has a tendency or probably has some likelihood of getting fairly political. Again, I think our hope is that we can just focus on data-driven arguments, and then it can kind of lead to some type of policy agenda.
Yeah, it seems like you touched on permitting. That's an area where you can have real immediate impact. If we can streamline permitting, if we can cut down the delays, it's not a Republican or Dem issue. Everybody wants the development. That seems to be a place where there should be some focus. I was glad the governor pointed it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she even mentioned this, I think it was Senator Nesbitt that mentioned that there was this example of having, to work through getting a curb cutting permit for some, pretty significant development in his backyard, right? There are these, myriad examples of holdups with getting something, some kind of, low level permit or some kind of esoteric, bureaucracy getting in the way of what we know we need, what we know the state needs. And so, again, hopefully there's some opportunity there.
Wendy, I was struck by the governor's bluntness when we talk about education. I think she said what a lot of people think. We spend a lot of money on K-12 education and our results are going down.
Yeah.
It was disappointing the week before. She was out championing graduation rates, but when you look into the numbers, literacy was down for those people graduating.
44th.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a competitive issue for us as we try to grow jobs here in Michigan. How do you think people react to that?
Yeah, I think it was a good first step that the governor acknowledged that we need to do better with our outcomes, right? And we have spent a lot of time in Lansing talking about how if only we had more money, right? If only we were to increase the per pupil allowance or to do this or that or the other thing, right? But it all kind of seems to come back to money. And we have said for years that it really isn't about necessarily money. Yes, you need ample funding in the classrooms, but really you need a focus on student performance and student success. And you need to focus on outcomes and look at the data. Is what we're doing today working? I would say our members generally are pleased to see that government is finally acknowledging that what we're doing isn't working by and large, that the system is broken and has only kind of become further broken in a post-COVID era. And the reason that we care about this, of course, is because these students that are K-12 systems are not successfully serving today in many cases are our future generation of workers in our state, right? So if we don't graduate kids from high school who have adequate reading levels and can do math and have soft skills, right? Soft skills are always undervalued kind of when we talk about K-12. We're going to have a really hard time competing for those jobs of tomorrow in Michigan. And so we're pleased to see this. I think the Oversight Committee probably will step into this space to some degree as well, right? Because this is kind of that intersection of families and government, and is the direction that the government is giving on this appropriate, or does it need to change and evolve?
And that's why I think it's critical for everyone in the policymaking world. We can't just keep treating the symptom. We can't just keep putting money at it. We have to look at what the underlying challenge is. I'm wondering, what do you think the appetite would be either in the legislature or the general public? There's been discussion over the last several years. We have so many different entities that have their finger in education, and they're all trying to do good work, whether it's internal departments and different agencies have different perspectives. Is it about time that we just put everything under the control of the governor and say, you choose the state superintendent, you choose the boards of our colleges and universities, you do for already many of them, and really have somebody to hold accountable to say, I like the direction or I don't. You delivered results or you didn't. Right now, you can have so much finger pointing back and forth, and even good programs don't get the resources they need because we're stretched across many departments.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and but would require a change in our Constitution. Yep. And so that's no easy task in and of itself. For those that aren't listening, I mean, to get a change in the Constitution isn't just a simple, introducing a bill in the legislature, voting on it, and then it changes. So, I do think that we need to have all solutions on the table. Currently, it's not working for a lot of our kids, and really need to be focused on what is in the best interest of kids. And, this is like our issues with the local units of government, right? We have 1,800 local units of government in Michigan. It's a crazy number, and each one are making their own decisions and trying to do what they think is best. Yep. But is there kind of a general focus on what is better for the average Michigander or the Michiganders themselves? And in this case, it would be what is best for all students of Michigan, and then kind of working backwards from there.
Mike, kind of going back to where we started the entire conversation, it seemed to be a political speech. There's material in there, but not details. And so it's hard to say it was substantive. Kind of behind the scenes, there's been a lot of grumbling that maybe the Dem caucuses aren't as thrilled with the governor right now. Why is she cozying up to President Trump? Why is she willing to work with him? How do you think that plays out into this year legislating to what can get accomplished?
Yeah, I think it definitely presents some challenges and some opportunities. I think, there are definitely Democrat lawmakers out there that feel burned by the governor, that feel like, okay, now the political winds have shifted and you left us behind for your own ambitions or something along those lines. I think there are also those that have craved a more solutions-oriented approach to begin with, and if they feel like that's what this is, then great, we'll take it. We're gonna run with it. I mean, I definitely think there are reasonable heads out there that can work just to drive past the politics and focus on the solutions. But no question that there are some that feel, that the governor has kind of left them behind and they're maybe wandering in the wilderness a bit.
Well, we've had the governor's budget presentation. We've had the state of the state. We have the Speaker of the House putting ideas out there. We have the Senate Minority Leader, Eric Nesbitt, doing a good job raising a lot of issues.
Yep. Where
do we go in the next month, Wendy? What comes up on the docket and where can we see progress?
So this legislative session has been a bit in reverse order, where we came out of the gate with immediate legislative attention and committee hearings on earned sick time and minimum wage. But we haven't really done all the basics yet in terms of even just setting up committees and having those organizational hearings and bringing in department heads to kind of educate these new committee members on the lay of the land. And so I think the next month is going to kind of be just that. Those activities that you would normally see in late January and February of a year. So prior to spring break, I think you'll see some appropriations committees begin to meet and talk about their budget and their budget recommendations and to start pulling those things together. But from a policy perspective, I really don't think the next month is going to bring that much significant action.
Okay. Well, time always flies by. I appreciate the conversation. A very special thanks to Wendy and Mike. To all of you for listening, we're hopeful that transparency, accountability is going to guide everyone's actions in the legislative process in 2025. The Michigan Chamber, we're going to be doing our part to make sure that's a reality. And we hope that you'll engage as well and you'll join us in that fight. Go to michamber.com.